More recently, particularly starting with the AIDS work in Africa, the Muslim faith community approached World Vision and also the Christian AIDS Bureau and asked for the methodology to have help translating the methodology into Muslim context using the Quran, because there was the same belief that actually the Quran didn't promote stigma in the case of HIV/AIDS. And more recently, World Vision has been helping in South Asia, translating the same content into the Hindu context. So it's really gone a long way, particularly this methodology. For the gender aspect, that came along related to the HIV/AIDS, particularly in Africa where the rates are so high. There's often higher rates amongst women and girls. So a lot of our staff and other agency staff said, well, wait a second, we have this great faith-based approach for HIV/AIDS stigma, but we're not addressing all the gender issues. Couldn't we do something around this issue in particular? So there was a particular text here from Elaine Poultney, which actually set out the basics of such an approach, and that's now been sort of modified and was piloted in Ethiopia, Congo and Uganda in 2008, and now has been expanded out to many more countries, including Solomon's. We started it in 2011 with a population of a target population of about 15,000 people. And it's really been embraced very rapidly. We've had the Solomon Islands Christian Association endorse it as a methodology. Also, there's another group called the Solomon Islands Full Gospel Assembly of smaller independent churches endorse it. And we also had the heads of the major churches, Anglican, Methodist, South Seas Evangelical, SDA, approve it also. So we've had a lot of buy-in. We interestingly had the Solomon Islands Police also approach us about using it with the police force. And in the last year, we've modified the approach to work with police, because police, like other Solomon Islanders, are 97% Christian, coming from a similar faith background. And we've really found that helps a lot, because Sister Doreen was saying to me earlier today, there's such an important stakeholder, the police, in this, as well as with church and other providers. That one just popped off. The other thing is we are linking very closely with the Christian Care Centre and also supporting them through the process. And we're now just, thanks to the Pacific Gender Initiative and AusAid, expanding this approach to 2 new provinces. So we're really getting a little bit of a scale around this. Why the Solomon Islands? 97% Christian. Faith plays a major role in people's lives. ANU did a research for us in 2011, and they did a survey of about 500 people in Honiara and really confirmed that people did feel faith leaders were very influential in moral issues, which it's deemed that this falls into. Also got the high rates of violence. And then the other interesting ANU observation was that, really what they found was that biblical messages had a much greater level of acceptance across the board, very high rate of acceptance of biblical messages. So that's why we really think for this context it's appropriate. The methodology, very quickly, I'll just put that up. It's not just a training program, it's about tailoring it for the country context, working through faith leaders and them setting up their own church or community networks, who then sort of work and empower the people in their congregations in terms of prevention, advocacy and care. But I'll just skip over that briefly. Some of the impacts we've observed: reduced incidence of gender-based violence, as you heard in the video, but also safer homes and communities generally. The women are often saying that they feel that women and children can thrive more. Quite a lot of changes in division of labour. Very often the men are saying they've changed their behaviours. We could ask Clifford, who's been through the program. There's a couple of you in the room here. Often the men change their behaviour and the division of labour changes. The church also feels quite empowered because they're actually able to be the frontline people responding. And then we've also found the relationships with other stakeholders are greatly increased because it's a Christian methodology. We can work well with the church providers, government and others. Some of the observed changes, and these will just be a few quick slides, but just to show there's some data behind this. You know, some of the things we've measured amongst other things. The Bible affirms the man is superior to the women. You'll see there a very marked difference before and after the program in the respondents. When we work through, you know, what we believe, World Vision, I guess, has a position that we believe that the Bible doesn't promote gender inequality. So we bring out the positive messages of equality, and we see that once that's explained, that there's quite a marked change. Tradition affirms women are emotional and lack intelligence. This is not my question, this came from ANU. Again, a very sort of marked change there. Husbands need to discipline their wives to correct their behaviour. Again, you see quite a big change during the program. Gender-based violence is not really a problem faith communities need to address. You can see pre the workshop, and that's one of the things that's been a real observation for us, is churches didn't realise it was such a problem until they understood the issues and had the data, and then you see quite a marked change. We get participants to draw at the start, and this includes the Archbishop we've had do this of the Anglican Church and down to anyone in a community. What makes a man and what makes a woman in Solomon's culture? And we see some fascinating representations. Usually the men are sitting around and doing things by themselves, and the women are doing everything else in the background, or the women's are often displayed as to be talking too much and causing violence is one of the things often put down. But then towards the end of the exercise, because the whole approach is about equality, being created equal in God's image, of gender relations being equal, you see pictures of men and women doing a lot more together, being equal, being side by side as an indicator. We've done quite a lot of research, I think, related to this approach, both in Solomons and globally. Just a couple more to go. One was a study which I noticed most of them have gone from outside, but we actually did a mapping with the UNFPA and Breakthrough on faith-based approaches across the Pacific. It's available online, but it researched a whole lot of different organisations and faith-based approaches to gender-based violence, and some of the conclusions were that they could, the researchers could really see that the churches were often not shy of tackling these issues, and there were unique strengths that faith leaders and faith-based organisations could use. We also had a study by ANU, by Patrick Kilby and Joyce Wu, who I'm sure Elizabeth would know, and they had some very interesting findings, particularly for us on Solomons, around the role of religion and the importance of biblical messaging and how strong that was, and the success of using biblical messages versus perhaps more mainstream rights-based messages. So they were very much endorsing this type of approach. And then we were lucky enough to share this methodology at the Commission on the Status of Women in New York earlier this year, and Penny Williams, who's Australia's Global Ambassador for Women and Girls, I thought made a really important quote where she said the Australian government realises the important role that church and faith plays in the Pacific and supports faith-based interventions like the Channels of Hope to address violence using the church. So there certainly is some groundswell around this. Lastly, we have one study which was done by Di Kilsby with IWDA, where they, and this is available on their website, where they really looked at our work in the Solomons and basically said in contexts where faith is such an integral part of the society, particularly Christian context, using these biblical texts does really enable participants to more fully unpack the origins of their behaviour and their beliefs, and then really be able to bring about that change. So basically that was another example of people looking at this particular methodology. So we're implementing it now across several projects in Solomon Islands. We're actually going to do a second measurement with ANU hopefully at the end of this year. A little bit short by M&E standards to do it in only 2 or 3 years since the start of the methodology, but we'd really like to see what change we can measure from a quantitative and qualitative perspective and get an outside perspective on it.